Nonna Vittoria smoothed the antique lace doily on the mahogany table, her trembling, liver-spotted hands arranging the porcelain teacups with surgical precision. Behind her, the muffled screams of Senator Higgins finally ceased, replaced by the wet, rhythmic gurgle of a throat meeting a serrated bread knife. She did not turn around. She simply poured the Earl Grey, the steam rising against the panoramic view of a rain-swept Manhattan skyline, while two hulking cartel sicarios dragged the heavy, bleeding trash bag toward the service elevator. "Sugar, dear?" she asked the empty air, her voice cracking with sweet, grandmotherly fragility, as if she were offering a treat to a child rather than celebrating the collapse of a federal investigation. "If you value your life and want to be part of the family, subscribe now before the dawn finds you." The scent of lavender and cordite hung heavy in the penthouse library. I stood in the shadows, my hands clasped behind my back, watching the matriarch of the Underworld adjust her reading glasses. She looked tiny in that massive leather wingback chair, her feet barely touching the Persian rug that cost more than the GDP of a small island nation. On her lap sat a half-finished woolen sweater, intended for her great-grandson's 4th birthday. In her hand, she held the remote control to an encrypted server that linked the 5 families to the Sinaloa cartel and the highest echelons of the Pentagon. We were not there for tea. We were there for the footage. The room was silent save for the rhythmic click-clack of her knitting needles and the hum of the hard drive. 3 other capos stood by the door, sweating through their Armani suits. They knew what I knew. When Nonna stopped knitting, people died. "Play it again, Stefano," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves skittering on pavement. I stepped forward and pressed the key. The massive wall-mounted screen flickered to life. The footage was high definition, taken from a drone hovering 300 feet above a shipping yard in New Jersey. It was raining on the screen, just as it was raining outside our window. The timestamp read 4 hours ago. On the screen, the deal was going south. We watched as the Russian Bratva laid out the merchandise, weapons-grade uranium encased in lead cylinders. It was the deal of the century, the kind of leverage that toppled regimes. Then the muzzle flashes bloomed white in the darkness. It was a massacre, precise, tactical, brutal. The camera zoomed in. The assailant moved with a fluidity that was terrifying to behold, dropping 3 Russians with double taps to the chest before they even raised their rifles. The figure stepped over the bodies, ignoring the millions of dollars in diamonds scattered on the wet asphalt, and walked straight to the lead cylinder. Then, the figure looked up, directly at the drone. "Freeze it," Nonna commanded. The image paused. The rain was suspended in streaks of gray. The assailant had removed the tactical balaclava. The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. One of the capos near the door made a small, choked sound. I felt a cold sweat prickle down my spine. We all expected a rival. We expected the triads, or perhaps a rogue CIA splinter cell. We did not expect him. It was Vincent. Vincent, with his charming smile and his law degree from Harvard. Vincent, who Nonna bragged about at Sunday Mass. Vincent, who was supposed to be the legitimate face of the family, the one kept clean, the one who never touched a gun. He was her favorite. He was the golden boy who brought her cannoli every Tuesday and kissed her cheek with genuine affection. On the screen, his face was a mask of cold indifference, eyes dead and shark-like, a smoking silencer in his hand. Nonna stared at the frozen image of her beloved grandson. The knitting needles did not stop. Click, clack, click, clack. The rhythm was hypnotic, a metronome counting down the remaining seconds of someone's life. "He looks thin," she said softly, tilting her head. I told him he wasn't eating enough. "Nonna," I began. my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. This changes the geopolitical landscape. If Vincent has gone rogue with the uranium, if he is working for the syndicate. She raised a hand, silencing me. Her skin was translucent, the blue veins mapping a history of violence that stretched back to the old country. She set her knitting down on the side table, right next to an encrypted satellite phone and a bowl of butterscotch candies. "He didn't wipe his feet," she noted, pointing a crooked finger at the screen where Vincent stood in a puddle of blood and oil. "Look at his boots. He is tracking filth everywhere. No discipline." "The uranium, Nonna," I pressed gently. "I see the uranium, Stefano. I am old, not blind." She reached for her tea, the cup rattling slightly against the saucer. She took a sip, her eyes never leaving the face of the boy she had raised since his parents were killed in the car bomb of '82. "He thinks he is a king now. He thinks because he holds the power of the sun in a briefcase, he can step over the family." She sighed, a sound of profound disappointment, like a teacher realizing a student had cheated on a test. "Bring him to me. He is armed with a nuclear deterrent, Nonna. He has a private army." She turned to look at me then. The sweetness vanished. The grandmother who baked cookies evaporated. In her place sat the woman who had personally strangled a cartel boss with a rosary bead necklace in 1995. Her eyes were black holes, devoid of light, devoid of mercy. "I changed his diapers, Stefano. I paid for his braces. I buried his secrets. Do you think a little uranium protects him from me?" She picked up the knitting again. "Call the cleaner. Tell him to prepare the acid bath in the basement, the big one." "For the Russians?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No," she said, resuming her rhythm. "Click, clack. For the golden boy. He broke the first rule. He made a mess." She paused, looking at the intricate pattern of the wool in her lap. "And Stefano?" "Yes, Nonna?" "Make sure he brings the cannoli before you put a bullet in his kneecaps. I'm feeling peckish." I nodded once, turning to the capos who were already reaching for their weapons. The order had been given. The war had begun. The grandmother had spoken. And in this city, her word was the only law that mattered. God might forgive Vincent for his sins, but Nonna Vittoria had a schedule to keep, and betrayal was not on the itinerary. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the lead-lined curtains drawn against the New York skyline. I watched Nonna Vittoria smooth the wool over her knees, her face returning to that deceptive mask of serenity. The order to hunt down Vincent, her own flesh and blood, had been given. But in our world, a death sentence is merely an administrative hurdle. The real work was the logistics. War costs money, and hunting a man with a stolen nuclear device costs a fortune. "Stefano," she murmured, her eyes inspecting the stitching on the sweater's cuff. "Get me Senator Sterling on the secure line, and tell the kitchen to bring up the fresh batch of biscotti, the almond ones." "The senator is currently in a hearing regarding the defense budget, Nonna," I replied, checking the encrypted tablet in my hand. "He might be difficult to reach." "He will answer," she said, her voice light and airy, like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. "Remind him that I still have the negatives from his trip to Bangkok in 1998. He will find a recess." She was right, of course. 2 minutes later, the voice of one of the most powerful men in Washington trembled over the speakerphone. Nonna didn't even pick up the handset. She just kept knitting, speaking to the air as if the senator were sitting on the rug at her feet. "Robert, dear," she cooed. "You sound stressed. Are you taking your vitamins?" "Vittoria." The senator's voice was a harsh whisper. "I am in the middle of a televised hearing. You cannot call me on this line. The FBI is sniffing around every transaction. The FBI is a nuisance, Robert. Like ants at a picnic. You just need to know where to spray the poison. She paused to count a stitch. I need a corridor cleared. Airspace over the Atlantic seaboard. Specifically, private charters leaving Teterboro for the next 12 hours. No transponders, no flight logs. Are you insane? The senator hissed. That's a NORAD issue. I can't just ground surveillance for the East Coast without raising a red flag the size of Texas. What are you moving? I am cleaning up a family mess, Robert. And if you do not clear that sky, I will release the photos. And then I will release the bank records for your wife's consulting firm in Zurich. She stopped knitting. The click-clack ceased. The silence was violent. Do we understand each other? Or do I need to send my boys to visit your daughter at her boarding school? She is graduating soon, yes? Such a lovely girl. It would be a shame if she missed the ceremony. There was a long, ragged exhale on the other end of the line. 12 hours. That's all I can give you. After that, the NSA sweeps the grid. 12 is plenty. You're a good boy, Robert. I'll send a basket of fruit to your office. She gestured for me to cut the line. As the connection died, she looked up at me, her eyes twinkling with a grandmother's pride. See, Stefano. Manners. It costs nothing to be polite. If you held the blackmail material on a U.S. senator, would you use it for money or for power? Tell us what your price would be. With the airspace secured, the machinery of the family began to turn. We needed to liquidate assets to fund the mercenaries Nonna was deploying to intercept Vincent. This wasn't a street war. This was high-level corporate warfare. Bring me the ledger, Nonna commanded. I placed the heavy leather-bound book on the table, pushing aside the bowl of butterscotch candies. She opened it, her finger tracing lines of numbers that represented illegal arms deals in Sudan, cocaine shipments in Rotterdam, and human trafficking routes through the Balkans. Liquidate the port holdings in New Jersey, she said, not looking up, and drain the accounts in the Cayman Islands, the St. Anthony's Orphanage Fund. The entire fund, Nonna. That is over $60 million. The IRS watches those charity accounts closely. Let them watch, she snapped. Vincent has taken something that makes $60 million look like pocket change. If he sells that uranium to the syndicate, or worse, to the ideological zealots in the Middle East, money will be useless because we will all be radioactive dust. She closed the book with a thud that echoed like a gavel. Now send in the twins. I want to see what they are wearing. I signaled the guards. A moment later, Marco and Luca entered the room. They were hulking men, 6'4", built like refrigerators, with scars mapping their faces. They were the family's most efficient hitmen, responsible for the disappearance of 3 union leaders and a rival boss in Chicago. Yet, as they stepped onto the Persian rug, they looked at the floor, shuffling their feet like scolded schoolboys. Nonna, Marco mumbled, clutching a suppressed submachine gun behind his back. You asked for us. Nonna stood up. It was a slow, painful process, her joints popping audibly. She walked over to Marco, who towered over her by 2 feet. She reached up, her frail hand trembling slightly, and slapped his cheek. It wasn't hard, but the sound was sharp. Look at you, she scolded, adjusting the collar of his leather jacket. You have mustard on your shirt. Disgusting. You're going to kill my grandson, not fix a carburetor. Have some self-respect. Sorry, Nonna, Marco whispered, his face turning crimson. We were eating hot dogs while waiting. Hot dogs, garbage food. That is why you are slow. She turned to Luca. And you. Your fingernails are filthy. When you pull the trigger, I want you to look professional. We are not savages. We are businessmen." She walked back to her chair, retrieving a small velvet pouch from her knitting basket. She tossed it to Luca. He caught it with one hand. "What is this, Nonna?" "Cyanide-tipped rounds. Custom-made in Switzerland. If you miss the head and hit the shoulder, he still dies in 30 seconds. Vincent is wearing body armor. I know because I bought it for him last Christmas. Do not aim for the chest." The twins nodded, terrified and awed. "Go," she waved a hand dismissively, "and take a Tupperware of lasagna from the fridge on your way out. You can't hunt on an empty stomach." Who is more dangerous, the hitman holding the gun or the grandmother telling him where to aim? Drop your verdict below. As the twins left, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. The adrenaline of the orders faded, replaced by a creeping cold paranoia. I stood by the window, watching the rain lash against the bulletproof glass. Something wasn't right. Vincent was smart, but he wasn't a ghost. He had bypassed 3 layers of security to get to the uranium. He knew the shift changes. He knew the camera blind spots. "Stefano," Nonna said softly. She wasn't knitting anymore. She was staring at the unlit fireplace. "Yes, Nonna." "Vincent is a good boy, but he is not a magician. He had the codes to the vault. The new codes. The ones I only changed yesterday." I felt the blood drain from my face. Only 3 people knew those codes. You, me, and Capo Ricci, she finished. Ricci was the head of our operations in Miami. He had been with the family for 40 years. He was loyal. Or so we thought. "Ricci is downstairs," I said, my hand instinctively moving to the pistol under my jacket. "He is coordinating the ground teams." "Bring him up," Nonna said. Her voice was devoid of emotion. It was dead. "And bring the tea set, the silver one." When Ricci entered, he looked confident. He was a silver-haired fox of a man, dressed in a $3,000 suit. He kissed Nonna's hand. "Nonna, the teams are moving. We have a lead on a warehouse in Queens." "Sit, Ricci," she said, gesturing to the armchair opposite her. "Have some tea. Chamomile. Good for the nerves." I poured the tea. I watched Ricci's hands. They were steady. Too steady. "You have been with us a long time, Ricci," Nonna began, picking up her cup. "Do you remember when my husband, God rest his soul, found you stealing tires in the Bronx?" "I do, Nonna. I owe him everything." "You owe this family everything," she corrected. "So tell me, why did the FBI deposit $200,000 into an offshore account linked to your mistress this morning?" Ricci froze. The cup stopped halfway to his mouth. The silence stretched, tight as a piano wire. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ricci stammered, a bead of sweat finally breaking on his forehead. "It must be a mistake, a setup." "I don't make mistakes, Ricci. I make widows." Nonna took a sip of her tea. "Vincent paid you, didn't he? He promised you a seat at the table when he takes over. He promised you the future." Ricci stood up, his hand going for his weapon, but I already had my muzzle pressed against the base of his skull. "Sit down," I ordered. Ricci collapsed back into the chair, defeated. "He's the future, Nonna. You're old. The world is changing. We can't run an empire on cookies and old-world honor anymore. Vincent has the uranium. He has the power." Nonna sighed, a sound of deep, weary sadness. She reached into her knitting basket again, but this time she didn't pull out wool. She pulled out a small glass vial. "The world changes, Ricci. But betrayal is timeless." She poured the contents of the vial into her own tea, stirred it, and then switched her cup with his. "Drink," she commanded. "What is it?" Ricci whispered, trembling. "It is a blend of herbs from my garden. Foxglove, nightshade. It will stop your heart in 4 minutes. It is painless if you relax." "Nonna, please. Drink!" Her voice cracked like a whip. "You betrayed my blood. You sold my secrets to the feds and my uranium to a boy who doesn't know how to tie his shoelaces. Drink, or Stefano will make it messy. I hate a mess on the rug." Ricci looked at me. He saw no mercy. He looked at Nonna. He saw only the abyss. With a shaking hand, he lifted the cup and drank. Nonna watched him, her face impassive. She waited until his breathing hitched, until his eyes rolled back, until the cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. "Clean this up, Stefano," she said, picking up her knitting needles once more. "Click, clack, and call the cleaner. We have work to do. Vincent knows we are coming now. The element of surprise is gone." "He will be waiting for us," I said, staring at Ricci's corpse. "Let him wait," Nonna said, a small, terrifying smile touching her lips. "I brought him into this world. I will take him out of it, and I will do it before supper. There is a rat in your inner circle. Do you interrogate them for information, or eliminate them immediately to send a message? Choose your tactic." Stefano dragged the heavy Persian rug toward the service elevator, the weight of Ricci's body creating a soft, friction-heavy sound against the hardwood. It was a sound I had heard too many times. Nonna remained in her armchair, her eyes scanning a ledger that dated back to the Reagan administration, her knitting needles resting silently on the mahogany table next to the silver tea service. "Stefano," she said, not looking up. "Make sure the boys use the van with the floral delivery logo. The neighbors in the penthouse next door are nosy. I promised Mrs. Galloway I would send her some orchids. We do not want her seeing a body bag." "Yes, Nonna," I grunted, heaving the traitor into the hallway where 2 of our largest enforcers, Marco and Big Sal, were waiting. They looked like mountains carved from granite, but as soon as they saw Nonna through the open door, they slumped their shoulders in a posture of deferential fear. "Marco!" Nonna called out. The giant froze. "Yes, Nonna." "You are not wearing a scarf. It is 40 degrees outside. Do you want to catch pneumonia and die before I have a chance to use you?" "No, Nonna. Sorry, Nonna." Marco quickly pulled a crumpled scarf from his pocket and wrapped it around his thick neck. "Good. Take the trash to the incinerator in Jersey, the one we own, not the public one. I do not want the Environmental Protection Agency fining us for burning high-quality Italian suits." As the elevator doors slid shut, the room fell silent again, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock. But the silence was a deception. Nonna's mind was louder than a war zone. She picked up the secure satellite phone, the one encrypted with military-grade software purchased from a defecting Israeli general 3 years ago. "Now regarding the senator," she said, her tone shifting from grandmotherly concern to icy command. She dialed a number. "Senator Clay. It is Nonna." I moved to the window, watching the lights of Manhattan. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but I knew exactly what was happening. Senator Clay was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. He was our shield against the federal investigations into our shipping containers. "Do not give me excuses, Jonathan," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "I do not care about the polls. I care about the shipment arriving in Newark tonight. Vincent has been talking to people. If those containers are inspected, they will find 3,000 modified assault rifles meant for the insurgency in Sudan. If they find them, I lose money. If I lose money, you lose your seat, and perhaps your brake lines." She paused, listening to his frantic stammering. "Yes, I know the FBI is watching. That is why you are going to announce a surprise inspection of the other dock. Draw their eyes away. Be a good boy, Jonathan. Remember, the photos from your weekend in Thailand are still in my safe deposit box. Safe travels." She hung up and looked at me. "He is shaking. He is weak. Men with too much to lose are always the first to fold. That is why we must move the liquid assets immediately." "The laundering operation in the casinos?" I asked, pouring myself a stiff drink. "Compromised," she said simply. "Ricci knew about the slot machine skimming in Vegas. If he told the feds before he died, the IRS is already printing the warrants. We need to wash the money through the art market. Call the auction house in London. Tell them I am suddenly very interested in the Renaissance collection. We will bid $20 million over the asking price using the shell companies in Panama, then sell them privately next month. We'll lose 30% on the exchange," I warned. "Better to lose 30% than to lose it all to the government," she replied, picking up a cookie and inspecting it for burnt edges. "Money is just paper, Stefano. Power is the ink that writes history. If you had to choose between keeping your fortune or keeping your freedom, which would you choose? Some men die for their wallets. Money or freedom? The choice defines a criminal's lifespan. Tell us what you would sacrifice." "Vincent knows the art dealer?" I said, realizing the flaw in the plan. "He spent a summer in London. He knows the routes." Nonna crushed the cookie in her hand, crumbs falling onto the table. It was a rare display of frustration. "Vincent, my own flesh and blood. He thinks because he knows how to use Bitcoin and encrypted apps that he understands the world. He forgets that I was moving heroin in baby formula cans while his father was still in diapers." The phone rang again. This time it was the landline, the red one. Nonna stared at it. Only the commission, the heads of the 5 other families, called on that line, or our suppliers in Colombia. She answered, "Speak." She listened for a long minute, her face unreadable. Her eyes narrowed, the wrinkles around them deepening like cracks in dried earth. "I see," she said finally. "Thank you, Don Moretti. I will send you a basket of muffins for the information." She hung up, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her tea. "Moretti says the FBI just raided the warehouse in Queens, the one Ricci mentioned before he died. But the warehouse was empty." "Empty?" I frowned. "But Ricci said—" "Ricci thought he was betraying us." Nonna interrupted, a dark realization dawning on her. "But Vincent played him too. Vincent fed Ricci false information to give to the feds, knowing we would catch Ricci and kill him. Vincent used Ricci as a distraction." "To distract us from what?" "From the real target," she whispered. "The server farm in Brooklyn, the one that holds the blackmail files on half of Washington and the encryption keys for our crypto wallets." My stomach dropped. "If he gets those keys, he bankrupts us," Nonna finished. "He cuts off our supply lines. He leaves us defenseless against the cartels and the Russians. He wants to starve us out before he drops the uranium on the market." She stood up, utilizing her cane, though I knew she didn't really need it. It was a prop, a weapon she could legally carry on a plane. "Get the car, Stefano, the armored one, and tell Marco and Big Sal to leave the body and come back. We are going to Brooklyn." "Nonna, that's a war zone. Vincent will have mercenaries there. Ex-military." "I have something better than mercenaries," she said, opening the closet near the fireplace. She pushed aside her collection of floral print coats to reveal a hidden panel. Behind it lay a rack of submachine guns and a crate of grenades. I have a grandmother's rage. She pulled out a modified MP5 submachine gun, checking the magazine with the familiarity of a woman checking a grocery list. Do you think I built this empire by baking bread, Stefano? I built it by burying anyone who tried to take it from me. Vincent wants a war. I will show him why the devil is afraid of old women. We took the elevator down to the garage. The air was thick with tension. The family was fracturing. Men were choosing sides. I could see the hesitation in the eyes of the guards in the lobby. They were wondering who would win, the young wolf with the technology, or the old lioness with the connections. In a war between the old guard and the new blood, who do you back? Experience or innovation? Pick your side. As we sped toward Brooklyn, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red, Nonna sat in the back seat, loading rounds into a spare magazine. She looked small against the leather seats, a frail figure in a wool cardigan. But the look in her eyes was nuclear. "He thinks I am weak," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "He thinks because I walk slow, I cannot catch him. But he forgets. I am the one who taught him to walk." "We have 4 cars of backup coming from the Bronx," I said, checking the tactical display on the dashboard. "But Vincent has a sniper team on the roof of the server building, and he has the local police precinct on his payroll." "Then we do not go through the front door," Nonna said. "Call the power company. Tell the supervisor, Mr. Henderson, that if he wants his gambling debts forgiven, he needs to cut the grid for 3 blocks around that warehouse. Complete blackout. Now. And the snipers? Darkness is the great equalizer, Stefano, and Marco has night vision goggles in the trunk." We arrived just as the streetlights died. The block plunged into an abyss of shadows. I could hear the confusion over the radio frequencies, the panicked shouts of Vincent's hired guns. Nonna opened the car door. The cold wind whipped her white hair. She didn't flinch. She racked the slide of her weapon. "Let's go visit my grandson," she said. "I need to teach him a lesson about respecting his elders." We moved into the alleyway, the smell of ozone and garbage filling the air. This wasn't just a business dispute anymore. This was a correction, and Nonna was the eraser. But as we approached the side entrance, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "She knows about the second ledger. Don't let her reach the server." I froze. The message wasn't for me. It was forwarded to me. By accident? Or as a warning? I looked at Nonna's back as she moved silently through the dark. Paranoia, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. Who else was talking? Was I the only one left who hadn't sold a piece of his soul to the highest bidder? Or was I just waiting for the right price? Every man has a price, and tonight the bidding is open. Would you warn her, or watch her fall to take the crown? "Make your move." I shoved the phone into my pocket, the screen burning against my thigh like a branding iron. The text message was a virus in my mind, rewriting every interaction I'd had with Nonna for the past 20 years. Was she testing me? Was Vincent trying to flip me? Or was there a third player on the board, someone watching the house of cards from the outside, waiting for a gust of wind? "Focus, Stefano," Nonna whispered, her voice scratching like sandpaper on silk. "You are breathing too loud. You sound like my late husband right before his heart exploded. Do not make me a widow twice." We breached the side door. Marco and Big Sal took point, their silhouettes massive and hulking in the ambient green glow of the night vision goggles. Nonna moved between them, small and hunched, her orthopedic shoes making 0 sound on the concrete. She held the MP5 tight against her floral cardigan, the muzzle discipline perfect. The warehouse was a labyrinth of shipping crates and server racks. This wasn't just a storage facility. It was the cardiovascular system of the East Coast underworld. Inside these servers, billions of dollars from heroin sales in Baltimore and arms deals in Sudan were being scrubbed clean, turned into legitimate real estate holdings in Manhattan and tech startups in Silicon Valley. "Clear left," Marco hissed. "Contact right," Sal countered, raising his rifle. Two of Vincent's mercenaries stepped out from behind a stack of crates, rifles raised. They were professionals, ex-Blackwater types, who charged $1,000 a day. But they hesitated. They saw the two giants, and then they saw the little old lady in the middle. That hesitation cost them their lives. Nonna didn't wait for her bodyguards. She fired 2 controlled bursts. "Pabatabt, padapa." The suppressors coughed, and the men crumpled, red mist spraying over a crate labeled "Olive Oil, Imported." "Sloppy," Nonna critiqued, stepping over a body. They were looking at my face, not my hands. I told Vincent not to hire Americans. They have no respect for the elderly. She paused to adjust her glasses, looking down at one of the groaning men. He was clutching his stomach. She had aimed low, intentionally. She leaned over him, looking for all the world like she was about to offer him a hard candy. "Young man," she said sweetly, "where is my grandson?" The mercenary coughed blood. "Go to hell, bitch," Nonna sighed, the sound of a disappointed teacher. "Language. I wash mouths out with soap for less. But for this?" She pressed the hot suppressor of her gun against his cheek. "For this, I use lie." "He's upstairs!" the man screamed. "Office, he's wiping the drives." "Thank you, dear." She straightened up and looked at Marco. "Finish your vegetables, Marco. Don't leave a mess." Marco drew a knife. We kept moving. Loyalty is a currency that devaluates quickly when a gun is pointed at your head. Do you stay loyal to the past or invest in the future? Tell us your move. The stairwell smelled of rust and damp concrete. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The text message flashed in my mind again. She knows about the second ledger. The second ledger wasn't money. It was leverage. It was the list of every federal judge, senator, and DEA agent Nonna had on her payroll. If Vincent leaked that, he wouldn't just bankrupt us. He would bring down the entire United States justice system. It was the nuclear option. And if Nonna knew that I knew where the physical backup was buried, I was a dead man walking. "Stefano," Nonna said without looking back as we climbed. "You are sweating. Is it the heat, or is it your conscience?" "It's the stairs, Nonna. I'm not as young as I used to be." None of us are. That is why we must build things that last. She paused at the landing. "I spoke to Senator Whitlock this morning. He was very rude. He said the FBI is asking questions about the concrete contracts for the new harbor tunnel. He wanted to know if I could guarantee his safety." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I knitted a lovely scarf for his mistress, and it would be a shame if his wife found it wrapped around his neck." She checked the chamber of her weapon. "He signed the permits an hour later. Politics is just extortion with better stationery, Stefano. Never forget that." We reached the top floor. The office door was heavy steel, reinforced. Vincent was inside, likely watching us on the cameras that still had battery backup. "Big Sal," Nonna commanded. "The door." Sal attached a breaching charge to the lock. We stacked up. The explosion was a dull thud that rattled my teeth. The door swung inward, twisting off its hinges. We stormed the room. It was empty. The servers were there, humming in the dark, their lights blinking rhythmically. But Vincent was gone. The window leading to the fire escape was open, the curtains fluttering in the night breeze. On the mahogany desk, a single laptop sat open. Nonna walked over to it, her cane tapping a slow, rhythmic beat on the hardwood floor. On the screen was a live video feed. It was Vincent. He was sitting in the back of a car, smiling. "Hello, Nonna." Vincent's voice crackled through the speakers. "You look tired. You should be in bed. And you should be in a grave, tesoro." She replied, her voice steady. "Run, Vincent. Run as fast as you can. But remember, I am the one who pays for the gas in your car. I am the one who owns the road you drive on." "Not anymore." Vincent grinned. "Check the transfer logs. I didn't just take the money. I took the insurance. I sent the files to the journalist at the Post. The story runs tomorrow morning. The bribery, the assassinations, the chemical weapons deal in Syria. All of it. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was it. The end of the empire. Nonna didn't scream. She didn't shoot the computer. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small tin, and popped a peppermint into her mouth. She sucked on it thoughtfully for a moment. "You foolish boy," she said softly. "Do you think I let you steal the real files? I swapped those drives 3 months ago. You just sent the Washington Post a recipe for lasagna and a list of my charity donations." Vincent's smile faltered. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Nonna leaned closer to the screen. "Stefano, call the editor of the Post. Tell him we are buying his paper, and tell him to fire the reporter who received the leak. I don't like his tone." She smashed the laptop shut with the butt of her gun, severing the connection. Silence filled the room. "Nonna," I said, my voice trembling. "Did you really swap the drives?" She turned to me, her eyes hard as diamonds. "Of course not. The boy has everything. He has enough evidence to put me in the electric chair and you in a hole so deep you'll see China." "Then why?" "Because fear is a weapon, Stefano. Vincent is arrogant. He will pause to check the files now. He will doubt himself. That gives us 20 minutes. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark city skyline. "And in 20 minutes, I can burn this city to the ground." She turned back to me, and for a second the mask slipped. She looked old, ancient. "The text message you received, Stefano. Show it to me." I froze. I hadn't told her. "Do not insult me," she said, raising the MP5 level with my chest. "I am old, not senile. You checked your pocket 3 times. You are sweating. And you looked at the door when we entered. Who is it? The feds? The Russians? Or is it my own flesh and blood offering you a deal? In this world, mercy is just a delayed death sentence. Would you spare the messenger or send a message? Decide the fate. Nonna, Read it." I pulled the phone out. My hands were shaking. "It says..." "She knows about the second ledger. Don't let her reach the server." Nonna stared at me. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then a small, terrifying smile curled her lips. "Good," she said. "That means the trap is working." "Trap?" "I sent that text, Stefano." The world spun. "What?" "I needed to know if you would tell me. I needed to know if you were loyal enough to ignore a warning, or stupid enough to hide it." She lowered the gun, but her finger stayed near the trigger. "You hid it. That is disappointing. But you didn't run. That is promising." She walked past me, patting my cheek with a hand that felt like cold marble. "We are going to the second location, the one in the Bronx. We need to prepare the cleaners. If the feds are coming, they will find nothing but ash and an old woman baking cookies. And Vincent..." "Vincent is a problem for the morning," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Tonight we deal with the leak. Someone inside our organization gave him the access codes. Someone close to us." She stopped at the door and looked back at me, her silhouette framed by the broken jamb. "I need you to find them, Stefano. And when you do, I don't want you to kill them. I want you to bring them to Sunday dinner. I have a new recipe I want to try. It involves hemlock and a very slow digestion process." As we walked out of the office, stepping over the debris of her empire, I realized the war hadn't even started yet. Vincent was just the opening act. The real enemy was in the shadows, sitting at our table, eating our food. And Nonna was hungry. The walls are closing in and the wire is hot. Who is the rat in the kitchen? "Place your bets." The black-armored Lincoln navigated the potholed streets of the Bronx, the suspension groaning under the weight of bulletproof plating and the heavy burden of our sins. Outside, the city was alive with the chaotic energy of a Friday night, but inside the cabin the air was cold and smelled faintly of lavender and gun oil. Nonna sat in the back seat, her tiny frame swallowed by the leather upholstery. She was knitting. The rhythmic click-clack of her needles was the only sound competing with the hum of the engine. "Stefano, fix your tie," she murmured without looking up from the crimson wool. "You look like a used car salesman. We are going to a safe house, not a frat party." I adjusted the silk knot, my fingers still numb. "Nonna, the account's in the Caymans. If Vincent really sent those files, the freeze order will hit the banks by morning. That is $400 million in cartel payments. 412 million, she corrected, purling a stitch. "And do not worry about the Caymans. I moved that money to a shell corporation in Dubai 3 days ago, under the name of a cat charity. The feds can seize the accounts if they wish. They will find $40 and a subscription to a yarn magazine." She stopped knitting and looked at me, her face illuminated by the passing streetlights. "The real problem is the shipment in Newark, the container labeled industrial sewing machines. Do you know what happens if the Port Authority opens that? Surface-to-air missiles destined for the separatists in the Balkans," I whispered. "Precisely. And if that gets out, I won't just have the FBI knocking. I will have the CIA, Interpol, and 3 very angry warlords who paid in advance. Call the union rep at the docks. Tell him his daughter's tuition at Yale is due. And I am feeling generous. I want that container lost before the sun comes up. In the game of shadows, money talks, but leverage screams. What is the price of your silence? Tell us your number." I pulled out my burner phone and made the call. As I negotiated the disappearance of enough ordnance to level a small country, Nonna hummed a lullaby. It was surreal. She was coordinating a global criminal conspiracy with the demeanor of a woman waiting for her bingo numbers to be called. We pulled into the alley behind a dilapidated laundromat on Arthur Avenue. The sign above the door flickered with a dying neon buzz. This was the nerve center of the Bronx operation, hidden beneath layers of grime and the smell of industrial detergent. 2 men stepped out from the shadows as the car stopped. Marco and Sal. They were massive, shaped like vending machines with legs, wearing ill-fitting suits that strained at the shoulders. They saw Nonna and immediately bowed their heads, terrified respect radiating off them. "Nonna," Marco stammered, opening the door. We didn't expect you." "Clearly," Nonna said, stepping out and poking Marco hard in the stomach with her knitting needle. "Look at this paunch. Have you been eating that garbage from the taco truck again? I told you, Marco, processed cheese slows your reflexes. If a shooter comes, you will be too busy digesting to draw your weapon." "Sorry, Nonna," Marco mumbled, looking at his shoes. Inside, now. We marched through the back entrance, past the humming washing machines where ordinary citizens washed their clothes, unaware that 5 feet below them, men were washing money. We descended a steel staircase into the basement. It was a high-tech bunker, walls lined with monitors displaying stock tickers, shipping routes, and live feeds from the security cameras of our rivals. Nonna threw her knitting bag onto a table covered in blueprints for a casino heist in Vegas. Report. Sal stepped forward, sweating. We swept the communications, Nonna. The leak. It's bad. The encryption keys for the server were accessed physically. Someone walked into the main office, bypassed the biometrics, and copied the ledger. Impossible, I said. Only 3 people have those biometrics. Me, Vincent, and... I stopped. The third name hung in the air like smoke. Nonna walked over to the nearest monitor. She tapped the screen with a manicured nail. And my nephew, Anthony. The one whose gambling debts I paid off last month. The one I put through law school. Anthony is family, I protested. He's weak, but he's not a traitor. Everyone is a traitor when the water gets hot enough, Stefano, Nonna said, her voice devoid of emotion. Vincent is the hammer, but Anthony was the hand that opened the door. He thinks because he is blood, he is safe. He thinks I am just a sweet old lady who bakes cannoli. She turned to Marco. Where is Anthony tonight? He's at the Diamond Club in Manhattan, Sal answered. Celebrating. He bought a bottle of Cristal. Celebrating his betrayal, Nonna mused. She opened a drawer in the metal desk and pulled out a small leather-bound book. She flipped through it until she found a page, then ripped it out. Marco, Sal, go to the club. Do not make a scene. Tell Anthony that Nonna is making his favorite braciole for Sunday dinner. Tell him attendance is mandatory. And if he refuses? Marco asked. Nonna smiled and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Then remind him that I know about the girl in Jersey, the one he keeps hidden from his wife. He will come. Trust is a currency that devalues quickly in this life. Who would you trust with the keys to your kingdom? Tag your ride or die. As the 2 heavyweights lumbered up the stairs to retrieve the prodigal nephew, Nonna turned her attention back to the screens. She began typing furiously, her arthritic fingers moving with surprising speed. She wasn't just checking accounts. She was rearranging the board. What are you doing? I asked. I am burning the forest to save the tree, she said. I am leaking information about the Russian mob's operations in Brooklyn to the FBI. By tomorrow morning, the feds will be so busy raiding the Petrov family that they won't have the manpower to look at us. It will buy us 48 hours. That starts a war with the Russians, I said, shocked by the escalation. We are already at war, Stefano. The Russians, the feds, Vincent. It doesn't matter. What matters is who is left standing when the music stops. She paused, looking at a grainy feed of a senator leaving a hotel room with a briefcase. Get me the phone. I need to call the governor. It is time to call in the favor for the bridge construction contract. We need concrete poured tonight. For the construction? For the bodies, she corrected, pulling a peppermint from her pocket. Suddenly, a red light on the console began to flash, a silent alarm. Nonna's eyes snapped to the security feed of the alleyway we had just entered. 3 black SUVs were rolling in, lights off. Men in tactical gear were stacking up by the rear door. They weren't feds. Feds wear windbreakers with yellow letters. These men wore all black, with no insignias. Mercenaries. Vincent, Nonna hissed. He didn't wait for the morning. He tracked the car. How? I panicked, reaching for my pistol. The knitting bag. she realized, looking at the innocent floral bag on the table. I gave it to his daughter last week to hold. He must have sewn a tracker into the lining. Clever boy. She didn't panic. She didn't run. She simply opened the oven door of the small kitchenette in the corner of the bunker, where she kept a stash of grenades next to the baking soda. "Stefano, kill the lights," she ordered, her voice steady as steel. "Marco and Sal are gone. It is just us. You take the stairs. I will take the heavy artillery." "Nonna, you can't—" "Do as you are told," she snapped, racking the slide of a shotgun she had pulled from beneath the sink. "I survived the war in the old country. I survived 3 husbands, and I survived the cancer. I will not be taken out by a grandson who doesn't know how to properly season a sauce." The heavy steel door at the top of the stairs boomed as the battering ram hit it. Once. Twice. Nonna looked at me, a gleam of pure, youthful adrenaline in her eyes. "Remember, Stefano, aim for the knees. They can't chase you if they can't walk." The door buckled. The sharks were in the water, but they had forgotten that they were swimming with a megalodon. The hunter becomes the hunted, and the walls are breaching. "How do you survive the night? Choose your weapon." The hinges screamed before the steel gave way. The door didn't just open. It disintegrated inward, kicked by the force of a breaching charge that filled the small bunker with choking gray dust. In the chaos of smoke and debris, the tactical lights of Vincent's mercenaries cut through the gloom like laser beams searching for a pulse. They expected resistance, perhaps a bodyguard returning fire. But they did not expect a 78-year-old woman with a tactical Remington shotgun resting on a bag of flour. Nonna didn't flinch. She exhaled slowly, the way she did when waiting for a soufflé to rise, and pulled the trigger. The boom was deafening in the confined space. The lead man in the stack took the blast center mass, his armor shattering under the point-blank impact, sending him flying back into his comrades like a ragdoll. "Watch the china!" Nonna screamed, racking the slide with a terrifying mechanical clack. "Stefano! The vent!" I scrambled toward the pantry, my ears ringing, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Nonna fired again, suppressing the entry team, then grabbed a spherical object from the counter. It wasn't an apple. She pulled the pin on the fragmentation grenade with her teeth, a move that must have cost her a bridge or a crown, and tossed it casually toward the doorway. "Eat up, boys," she muttered. She shoved me into the pantry, where a false back panel had already swung open to reveal a narrow, dank tunnel. As we slid into the darkness, the bunker behind us erupted. The ground shook, dust rained from the ceiling, and the screams of the mercenaries were cut short by the concussive force of the blast. We crawled for 50 yards through the damp earth until we emerged into the basement of the unassuming laundromat next door. A black sedan was waiting, engine idling, the driver invisible behind tinted glass. Nonna brushed the dust off her cardigan, straightened her pearl necklace, and opened the rear door as if she were simply returning from church. "Drive," she commanded as we piled in. "The warehouse in Queens. And turn up the heat. My arthritis is flaring up from the recoil." "When the walls close in, do you fight with fire or vanish into the smoke? Tell us your escape plan." As the car merged onto the highway, the innocent facade evaporated. Nonna pulled a secure satellite phone from her purse, bypassing the contacts for her bridge club and dialing a number that didn't exist in public directories. "It's done," she said into the receiver, her voice devoid of the warmth she used for family dinners. "Vincent made his move. He missed. Now we squeeze." She put the phone on speaker. A nervous voice on the other end answered. It was Senator Mitchell. "Nonna, I told you I can't move the funds that quickly. The SEC is watching the shell companies in Panama. If I authorize the transfer of $40 million to a construction firm in Macau, flags will go up. Senator, Nonna said, unwrapping a butterscotch candy. Do you remember the summer of '98? The intern? The boat trip? There was a silence on the line so profound it felt heavy. I have the photos, Mitchell. I have the negatives. And I have a very eager reporter at the Times who would love a scoop for the Sunday edition. You will move the money. You will designate it as Emergency Infrastructure Relief. And then you will approve the arms shipment waiting in the port of Newark. My boys need new toys, and I am tired of buying American surplus. I want the German shipment released. I'll handle it, the senator stammered. Within the hour. Good boy. Stop biting your nails. It's a bad habit. She hung up and looked at me. Stefano, check the accounts. The moment that money hits Macau, I want it washed through the casinos and back in New York by morning. We are going to buy Vincent's debt. His debt? I asked, tapping furiously on the laptop resting on my knees. Vincent is leveraged. He borrowed heavily from the cartels to pay for those mercenaries. If we buy his debt, we own his life. The cartels don't care who pays them, as long as they get paid. Once I hold the note, I can call it in, and the interest rate will be his head. The car swerved slightly as we navigated the potholes of an industrial district. We were playing a game of three-dimensional chess, where the pieces were made of C4 and illicit bearer bonds. Nonna wasn't just a crime boss. She was a central bank of the underworld. She controlled the flow of narcotics from the Golden Triangle to the streets of Chicago, and she laundered the profits through a chain of legitimate bakeries and laundromats that spanned the East Coast. We arrived at the warehouse. It looked abandoned, but inside it was a fortress. Crates of assault rifles were stacked on pallets next to boxes of imported olive oil. A group of 4 men stood around a table covered in maps and blueprints. They straightened up immediately as Nonna entered, stubbing out cigarettes and hiding beer bottles. "Nonna!" Marco shouted, rushing over. He looked relieved but terrified. "We heard about the bunker. We were loading up to come get you." "If you were loading up, you were too slow," she scolded, walking past him to the table. She slapped Marco on the cheek, hard enough to sting, soft enough to be affectionate. "Look at you, Skinny. Have you been eating? There is leftover lasagna in the fridge in the back. Heat it up. But first, give me the situation report." "The Russians took the bait," Sal reported, pointing to a map of Brooklyn. "The FBI raided the Petrov nightclub an hour ago, seized 3 tons of cocaine. The Russians think Vincent tipped them off because we used a burner phone registered to one of Vincent's lieutenants." "Excellent," Nonna purred. "Chaos is a ladder, and I am wearing sensible shoes. But we have a problem. Vincent knew about the bunker. The tracker in the bag was one thing, but he knew the layout. He knew to breach the rear door." The room went silent. The air grew thick, suffocating. "Someone in this room is talking," Nonna said softly. She didn't yell. She didn't rage. She walked to the small kitchenette set up in the corner of the warehouse and turned on the electric kettle. "Someone here thinks that Vincent represents the future, that I am just an old woman who should be in a home, not running an empire." She opened a tin of tea leaves and began to measure them out. "But you forget," she continued, her back to the men. "Old women see everything. We are invisible. We sit on park benches and listen. We watch the way your eyes shift when you talk about profits. We notice the new watch you bought that your salary cannot justify." She turned around, holding a steaming mug of tea. Her eyes scanned the 4 men, Marco, Sal, and 2 younger soldiers, Ricky and Paulie. "Paulie," Nonna said, her voice sweet as honey. "Come here, darling. Have some tea. You look pale." Paulie, a 20-year-old muscle-bound enforcer, hesitated. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "I'm okay, Nonna. Really. Come," she commanded. The sweetness was gone. Paulie stepped forward, his hands trembling. He took the mug. "That watch," Nonna pointed to his wrist. "Rolex Daytona. Gold. $50,000. Did you win the lottery, Paulie? Or did Vincent give you a signing bonus?" "Nonna, I swear, I won it in a card game," Paulie stammered, backing away. "Liar," Nonna whispered. She looked at Marco. "He sold us out for a watch. He sold your life. My life. For a piece of jewelry." Marco's face hardened. He drew his pistol, but Nonna raised a hand. "No, Marco. Not here. We don't stain the floor where we keep the olive oil." She looked at Paulie with genuine disappointment. "I knitted you a scarf for Christmas, Paulie. I made sure your mother had the best doctors when she was sick. And this is how you repay me?" Paulie dropped the mug. It shattered, tea splashing across his expensive shoes. He reached for his waistband, but he was slow. Too slow. Nonna didn't move, but Sal did. A single punch to the gut doubled Paulie over, and before he could gasp for air, he was disarmed and shoved into a chair. "Tie him up," Nonna said, turning back to her maps. "We will deal with him later. Right now we have work to do. The governor called back?" "Yes," I said, holding up the phone. "The funds are moving. The arms shipment is released." "Good. Load the trucks. We are taking the fight to Vincent tonight. He hit my home. I am going to burn his city to the ground." She paused, looking at the trembling traitor in the chair. "And Paulie, when we are done, you will tell Vincent exactly what I want you to tell him. You will be my message." Betrayal leaves a bitter taste that no amount of sugar can hide. How do you handle a traitor in your inner circle? Forgive or eliminate? "Stefano." Nonna beckoned me over to the table. She traced a line from the docks to a penthouse in Manhattan. "Vincent is hiding here. The penthouse at the Pier. He thinks he is untouchable because he has high-rise security and a private elevator. It's a fortress, Nonna. We can't breach that without an army. We don't need to breach it." She smiled, a wicked glint in her eyes. "We own the catering company that services the hotel. Tomorrow is his birthday. He ordered a cake, a very large, very expensive cake." "You're going to poison him?" "Too impersonal." She shook her head. "I want to look him in the eye. We are going to deliver the cake. Marco, you are the driver. Sal, you are the waiter. I will be the baker." "And the cake?" I asked. "The cake will be delicious," she said. "But the surprise inside will be quite loud. I need 3 pounds of Semtex. Do we have it?" "We have it," Marco confirmed. "Good. Get the mixer. And someone find me my apron, the one with the flowers. If I am going to assassinate my grandson, I want to look presentable." The warehouse sprang into action. The dynamic shifted instantly from fear to focused aggression. This was the power of the MATRIARCH. She could turn a group of terrified thugs into a disciplined army with a few words and a stern look. She controlled the violence because she understood the human element. She knew that fear was a tool, but love, twisted, dark, possessive love, was a weapon. As the men loaded weapons into the bakery vans, Nonna sat down next to me. She looked tired for a brief second, the weight of the years pressing down on her frail shoulders. "Stefano," she said quietly, "do not let the power seduce you. It is a lonely lover. Look at me. I have millions buried in the desert. I have senators on speed dial, and I have people who would die for me. But I cannot go to the grocery store without a bodyguard. I cannot sleep without a gun under my pillow. Why do you do it then? I asked. Why not walk away? She patted my cheek, her skin paper-thin and cold. Because, my dear, if I walk away, the wolves will eat the sheep, and I would rather be the shepherd who slaughters the wolves than the sheep who waits for the teeth. She stood up, the moment of vulnerability gone as quickly as it had come. Enough talking. The icing won't whip itself. Let's go bake a disaster. The game requires sacrifice, and the stakes are your soul. Are you ready to pay the price for absolute power? The flower cloud rose like smoke in a war zone as Nonna dumped a sack of white powder onto the stainless steel table. To an outsider, it looked like a harmless Sunday afternoon ritual. But the industrial mixer hummed with a menacing rhythm, drowning out the muffled whimpers of Paulie, who was currently duct-taped to a dolly in the corner. Beside the flower, Marco was carefully stripping the insulation off copper wires, his large calloused hands surprisingly delicate as he prepared the blasting cap. Too much sugar makes the crumb weak, Stefano. Nonna lectured, cracking eggs with one hand while holding a burner phone to her ear with the other. Just like an organization. If you're too sweet, you crumble. If you're too hard, you break your teeth. Balance. Hand me the vanilla. I passed her the bottle, my eyes scanning the tablet in front of me. The Cayman accounts were flashing red. Nonna, the transfer to the shell company in Panama is stuck. The bank is asking for additional verification on the Grandma's Old World Textiles account. That's $40 million hanging in the void. Tell the bank manager that if he does not release the funds in 10 minutes, I will release the photos of him and that cocktail waitress from the Golden Nugget, she said without looking up, vigorously whisking the batter. And tell Senator Higgins that his re-election campaign donation is contingent on the Port Authority, overlooking the container from Odessa arriving tonight. It contains the RPGs for the cartel. I promised the Mexicans delivery by Tuesday, and I never break a promise. I typed the messages rapidly. It was surreal. We were laundering enough money to buy a small country and trafficking military-grade hardware, all while she worried about the consistency of a sponge cake. Senator Higgins is pushing back, I said, reading the encrypted reply. He says the FBI has increased surveillance on the docks. He wants double the fee. Nonna stopped whisking. She wiped her hands on her floral apron and walked over to me, her orthopedic shoes squeaking softly on the concrete. She took the phone from my hand. Senator, she said, her voice sounding like a sweet grandmother calling her grandson for supper. This is Nonna. I hear you are concerned about inflation. It is terrible, yes? But let me remind you of something. The concrete in the foundation of your new beach house. My company poured it. It would be a shame if cracks appeared, or if the structural integrity failed while your family was sleeping. Do we understand each other? She paused, listening. A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. Wonderful. The wire will be there in the morning. Say hello to your lovely wife for me. She hung up and tossed the phone back to me. Greed is the only language politicians speak fluently. Never forget that. Power is not given. It is taken and held by the throat. Would you have the stomach to threaten a senator, or would you fold under the pressure? Tell us your move below. Marco, the detonator! Nonna commanded, returning to the bowl. Ready, Nonna. I rigged it to the candles. When he blows out the flame, the circuit closes. Boom. Artistic, she nodded approvingly. But make sure the wiring is insulated with the marzipan. I don't want him tasting copper before he tastes oblivion. Now, Sal, bring me the ledger. We need to discuss the union dues. Sal, who was currently polishing a silencer with a rag, stepped forward with a heavy leather-bound book. The warehouse was a hive of criminal industry. In the back, 3 men were counting stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands, packing them into vacuum-sealed bags to be stuffed inside hollowed-out wheels of Parmesan cheese for export. It was the perfect smuggling method. Customs dogs smelled cheese, not the cocaine residue on the bills. "The longshoremen are restless," Sal grunted. "They want a bigger cut of the import tax on the stolen luxury cars." "They get 5%, Nonna said, pouring the batter into the massive circular pan. "If they want more, remind them what happened to Jimmy Two-Toes. He became Jimmy No-Toes because he didn't understand the concept of overhead costs." Suddenly, the heavy steel door of the warehouse buzzed. The security feed on the wall flickered. I saw a black sedan idling 3 blocks away. It wasn't one of ours. "Nonna," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "We have eyes. Unmarked sedan. Sector 4. The room went dead silent. The cash counter stopped. Marco's hand hovered over his pistol. Paulie, in the corner, widened his eyes in terror, perhaps hoping for a rescue that would only get him killed faster. Nonna didn't flinch. She slid the cake pans into the industrial oven and set the timer. "Is it the feds or Vincent's men?" she asked calmly. "Antenna configuration suggests feds," Marco said, peering at the grainy monitor. "They're sitting on the perimeter. They aren't raiding, they're listening." "Someone is singing," Nonna whispered, the warmth vanishing from her face. She turned to look at Paulie, then swept her gaze across the rest of us. "Paulie gave them the location of the safe house, but he didn't know about this warehouse. Someone else is talking. Someone close." The air grew heavy, suffocating. Paranoia is the ghost that haunts every criminal empire. You look at your brother and see a rat. You look at your son and see a witness. "Stefano," she said, her voice sharp. "Sweep the room for bugs. Marco, initiate the jamming protocol. If they are listening, all they will hear is static and opera music. And Sal, go out the back, circle around, get me the license plate number. I want to know which agency is parking on my sidewalk." Paranoia is the price of the crown. When the walls start closing in, who do you trust? Your family, your money, or only yourself? Drop your answer in the comments. I pulled out the frequency scanner and began walking the grid of the warehouse. The device remained silent near the money, silent near the guns. But when I passed the crate of imported olive oil near the loading bay, the needle spiked. "Nonna," I called out. "Found it." I reached under the lip of a crate and pulled out a tiny black disc. A listening device. High-tech, military grade. Nonna walked over, took the device, and dropped it into a glass of water. This was not placed by a stranger. This was placed by someone who had access to the loading schedule. She looked at the men loading the cheese. 2 of them looked down. One of them, a young kid named Enzo, started sweating. He wiped his forehead, leaving a streak of flour. "Enzo," Nonna said softly. "Come here, darling. Have a cookie." She held out a fresh biscotti from a jar on the counter. Enzo approached, trembling. I didn't put it there, Nonna. I swear on my mother's eyes." "Shh," she soothed, patting his cheek. "You look pale. You're not eating enough. Is the FBI feeding you well? Do they give you good coffee?" Enzo broke. He fell to his knees, sobbing. "They have my sister, Nonna. They said they'd deport her. They said—" The sound of a silenced pistol is often described as a foot. But in the cavernous warehouse it sounded like a heavy book dropping flat on a table. Enzo slumped forward. Marco holstered his weapon before the casing even hit the floor. "Clean that up," Nonna said, her voice devoid of emotion. "And send flowers to his sister. It is tragic when young men die of sudden heart failure." She turned back to the oven. The timer dinged. "The cake is ready," she announced, putting on her oven mitts. Perfect timing. The smell of gunpowder was ruining the aroma of the vanilla. We worked in silence for the next hour. The body was removed. The floor was bleached. The cake was cooled, stacked, and frosted with impeccable white buttercream. Inside the layers sat 3 pounds of plastic explosive, invisible to the naked eye. "Marco, bring the van around," Nonna ordered, untying her apron to reveal a dark, tailored suit underneath. She adjusted a pearl necklace that probably cost more than the entire block we were standing on. "Sal, you have the waiter's uniform. Stefano, you carry the gift." "The gift?" I asked. She handed me a beautifully wrapped box. It was heavy. "Lead for the bodyguards," she winked, just in case the cake doesn't agree with them. We loaded the van. The city lights of New York twinkled in the distance, a sea of diamonds and broken dreams. We were driving into the heart of the beast, into the territory of Vincent the Butcher, her own flesh and blood, who had turned against the family. "Nonna," I said as I climbed into the passenger seat, "if we pull this off, it starts a war. The commission won't stand for a hit inside the Pierre Hotel. It breaks the neutral ground rules." Nonna sat in the back, the cake box resting on her lap like a precious grandchild. Her face was illuminated by the passing streetlights, revealing the deep lines of a century of survival. "The commission is a group of old men scared of their own shadows," she scoffed. "They think rules keep them safe. Power keeps you safe. Fear keeps you safe. Tonight we do not just kill Vincent. We kill the idea that anyone can touch us and live." She checked the small silver pistol in her purse, right next to her rosary beads. "Drive, Marco. My grandson is waiting for his birthday surprise. It would be rude to keep him waiting." The board is set, the pieces are moving, and there is no turning back. Are you a player in the game or just a pawn waiting to be sacrificed? Choose your side in the comments. The van hummed over the potholes of Fifth Avenue, the suspension groaning under the weight of tactical gear and baked goods. Nonna ignored the bumps. She was busy on her encrypted satellite phone, a device that looked like a cheap flip phone from the late 90s but cost more than a Ferrari. "I do not care about the Cayman regulations, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "The $300 million from the weapons sales in Yemen needs to be washed and dried by Monday morning. If the frantic scratching of your pen is the only sound I hear, I will assume you are writing your last will and testament." She snapped the phone shut and dropped it into her purse, right next to the detonator. "Bankers," she sighed, smoothing the wrinkles of her skirt. "They act like criminals, but they lack the decency of a gangster. At least when we rob you, we have the courtesy to show you the gun. In a world where white-collar theft rivals violent crime, who is the real villain? The banker with the pen or the hitman with the pistol? Tell us who you fear more in the comments." I glanced in the rearview mirror. "Nonna, we're 2 minutes out. The Pierre is swarming. Vincent has the entire ballroom locked down for his charity gala. He's got state senators, union leaders, and half the Sinaloa cartel in there pretending to care about orphanages." "Good," she said, adjusting Marco's tie. "Crooked politicians are expensive, but they provide excellent cover. And Marco, fix your collar. You look like you slept in a dumpster. We are going to a party, not a landfill." "Yes, Nonna," Marco mumbled, holstering his beretta beneath his tuxedo jacket. "Remember the plan," she continued, her tone shifting from matriarch to general. "Sal, you take the service entrance. Ensure the kitchen staff takes an early smoke break. Stefano, you locate Senator Wilkins. Hand him the envelope with the photos of him and that teenage gymnast. Tell him his vote on the Port Authority shipping contracts belongs to me now. If he hesitates, remind him that accidents happen in the shower every day. We pulled up to the curb. The valet looked at the battered van with disdain until Marco stepped out, looking like a granite statue in a tuxedo, and handed him $100 bill. Nonna stepped onto the sidewalk. She looked frail, leaning heavily on a cane with a handle carved from ivory. She clutched the cake box with trembling hands. To the observer, she was a sweet old woman delivering a treat. To us, she was the Grim Reaper in orthopedic shoes. The security at the door was tight, a metal detector and 2 gorillas in suits who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. One of them stepped forward, blocking Nonna's path. "Invitation only, ma'am. And we need to check the box." Nonna looked up at him, her eyes wide and watery behind her thick glasses. "Oh, young man, surely you wouldn't spoil a surprise birthday cake for my grandson. I spent all day whipping the buttercream. It's his favorite. Lemon zest and a secret ingredient." The guard hesitated. Marco stepped in, his voice low. "Touch the box, and you explain to Vincent why his grandmother is crying in the lobby on his big night." The guard paled. Everyone knew Vincent the Butcher had a temper, but fewer knew that his power came from the woman standing before him. He waved us through. "Go ahead, ma'am. Sorry for the trouble." "Such a polite boy." Nonna beamed, patting his arm. "I'll save you a slice." We entered the ballroom. It was a sea of excess. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto tuxedos and evening gowns. Waiters circulated with champagne, weaving through a crowd that represented the unholy trinity of politics, finance, and organized crime. In the center of it all stood Vincent. He was 40 years old, handsome in a cruel way, holding a glass of scotch and laughing at a joke made by a cartel lieutenant. He wore the arrogance of a man who thought he had killed off his past. "Look at him," Nonna whispered, her grip tightening on her cane. "He thinks he is a king because he sits on a chair I built for him. He forgets that the wood can rot." She handed the cake box to Stefano. "Put this on the main table, center stage. Make sure the candle is straight." We moved through the crowd. I saw Senator Wilkins in the corner looking nervous. Stefano brushed past him, slipping a thick envelope into his jacket pocket. The senator stiffened, looked at Nonna across the room and turned ghost white. He nodded once, then quickly downed his drink. The shipping lanes were ours again. Power is not given. It is taken, bought, or coerced. If you had the leverage to control a politician, would you use it for money or for justice? Drop your choice in the comments below. Nonna navigated the room like a shark in shallow water. She kissed cheeks, complimented dresses, and accepted condolences for death she had personally orchestrated. Finally, she reached the center of the room. "Vincent!" she cried out, her voice cracking with feigned emotion. The room went silent. Vincent turned. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered, masking his fear with bravado. "Nonna!" He opened his arms. "I didn't think you'd make it. I heard your health was failing." "Failing?" She hugged him, her small frame disappearing into his embrace. She whispered into his ear, loud enough only for him and the nearby cartel members to hear. "My health is fine, Caro, but I heard there is a sickness in the family. A sickness of the tongue. People talking to the feds." She pulled back, patting his cheek. Her hand lingered near his jugular. "But tonight is for celebration," she announced to the room. "I brought you a cake, just like when you were a little boy." Stefano placed the pristine white cake on the table in front of Vincent. The icing was flawless. Vincent stared at the cake. He knew. He looked at Nonna, then at the exits. Marco and Sal were blocking the main doors. The kitchen entrance was locked. "You shouldn't have," Vincent said, sweat beading on his upper lip. "I insisted." Nonna smiled sweetly. "Cut it, Vincent. Make a wish." The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. The cartel members sensed the shift. Hands drifted toward suit jackets. "Nonna," Vincent said softly. "We can talk about the territory, the shipping routes. I can give you 60%. 60%? Nonna laughed, a dry rasping sound. "You offer me pieces of what is already mine. You sold out the family to the FBI for immunity, Vincent. I saw the files. I heard the tapes." She leaned in close, her grandmotherly facade dropping to reveal the cold steel beneath. "There is no immunity from me." She turned her back on him and started walking away. "Enjoy the cake, Vincent. It's a blast." I checked my watch. We had 30 seconds to get behind the blast shields of the reinforced pillars near the entrance. "Wait!" Vincent screamed. He drew a gun, pointing it at her back. The room erupted into chaos. The cartel members drew their weapons. Nonna didn't flinch. She didn't even turn around. She just kept walking, counting down under her breath. 5, 4, 3. "Marco," she said calmly, "cover your ears. The fuse is lit, and the countdown has begun. Do you stay and watch the Empire burn, or run for cover? Hit the like button if you're ready for the explosion." The ballroom windows shattered outward, showering the street below in a rain of diamonds and glass. The shockwave punched through the reinforced pillars, but we were already behind the blast shield of the entryway. The sound was not a bang, but a physical blow to the chest, a sudden vacuum that sucked the air out of the room before expelling it with the force of a freight train. Smoke billowed, thick and smelling of cordite and burnt sugar. The screams began a second later. Nonna adjusted her shawl, dusting a speck of plaster from her shoulder. She did not look back at the carnage where Vincent and the traitorous lieutenants had been standing. Instead, she turned to Marco, who was blinking rapidly, his ears ringing. "Check the senator," she said, her voice cutting through the ringing in my ears. "If he is alive, tell him his debt is transferred to the new management. If he is dead, send flowers to his widow. Lilies. They look so dignified." We moved toward the service elevator. The chaos behind us was absolute. Sirens were already wailing in the distance, a discordant symphony of the city reacting to the MATRIARCH's wrath. When the dust settles, do you rebuild from the ashes, or leave the ruins for your enemies to clean up? Tell us your strategy in the comments. The elevator descended smoothly to the parking garage. Nonna leaned on her cane, her breathing steady. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook and a gold pen. She crossed out a name with a slow, deliberate line. "Vincent had poor taste," she murmured. "But he had excellent connections in the port of Miami. Stefano, call the harbor master. Tell him the shipment of agricultural equipment from Bogota is arriving on Tuesday. If he asks about Vincent, tell him Vincent has retired to the countryside. Permanently." "Yes, Nonna," Stefano said, opening the door to the armored SUV. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere shifted from violence to business. The interior was soundproofed, a mobile command center wrapped in velvet and bulletproof glass. Nonna sat back, resting her feet on a heated ottoman. She picked up a half-finished scarf she had been knitting earlier that day. "The Russians are getting impatient," she said, her needles clicking rhythmically. "They want the guidance chips for the drones. Have we washed the money from the Macau casinos yet?" The launderers are working double shifts, I replied, checking the tablet mounted on the console. We moved 40 million through the shell companies in Cyprus this morning. The construction contracts in Jersey are absorbing the rest. It's clean, Nonna. Squeaky clean. Good. She paused to count a stitch. Money is like laundry, boys. If you let it sit too long, it starts to stink. You have to keep it moving, tumbling, until it comes out fresh and smelling of legitimate enterprise. The phone on the console buzzed. It was a secure line. Nonna nodded at me to answer. It's the lawyer, I said, handing her the handset. Harold, Nonna said, her voice dripping with grandmotherly affection. Did you see the news? Such a terrible gas leak at the hotel. A tragedy. She listened for a moment, her expression hardening. The knitting needle stopped. The FBI? She asked softly. Harold, darling, I pay you $3,000 an hour to keep the pests out of my garden. If Agent Miller is asking questions about the Cayman's accounts, then perhaps Agent Miller has a gambling problem we can help him with. Or a mistress. Find his weakness, Harold. Everyone has a crack in the foundation. She hung up the phone and looked out the window at the passing city lights. The reflection in the glass showed a frail old woman, but the eyes were ancient and cold. Vincent wasn't the only one talking, she said to the air. The feds knew exactly where to put the pressure. Someone else is singing. The temperature in the car seemed to drop. Marco and Stefano exchanged a nervous glance in the rearview mirror. In this family, suspicion was a death sentence, and Nonna's paranoia was rarely unfounded. Who had access to the shipping manifests? She asked. Only the inner circle, Nonna, Stefano said, his voice tight. Me, Marco, Vincent, and Sal. Sal, Nonna sighed, shaking her head as if disappointed in a grandchild's report card. Sal, who just bought a new boat? Sal, who has been spending his weekends in Atlantic City? He says he's winning, Marco offered weakly. The house always wins, Marco, Nonna snapped. Unless you own the house, and Sal does not own the house. She reached into her knitting bag and pulled out a tin of butterscotch candies. She offered one to me, then popped one into her own mouth. Bring him to the warehouse tonight, the one in Queens. Tell him I need him to taste a new batch of marinara sauce. Tell him it's a family recipe. Loyalty is the currency of the underworld. But inflation is high. Would you betray your boss for $10 million and a new identity? Yes or no? Drop your answer below. We arrived at the safe house, a penthouse overlooking Central Park. It was a fortress disguised as a luxury apartment. Paintings worth more than the GDP of small nations lined the walls. Nonna walked straight to the kitchen, where a large pot was simmering on the stove. The smell of garlic and basil filled the air, masking the metallic scent of blood that seemed to cling to our clothes. Sit, she commanded. We sat at the marble island. She stirred the sauce, tasting it with a wooden spoon. The arms deal with the cartel goes through tomorrow, she said, transitioning seamlessly back to business. The crate of assault rifles is hidden inside the shipment of frozen fish. Make sure the refrigeration units are running. I don't want the merchandise smelling like cod. And the payment? I asked. Bitcoin, she said. Transferred to the cold wallets. No banks. No trails. The world is changing, boys. We have to be digital ghosts. But some things... She tapped the wooden spoon on the pot's rim. Some things require the old ways. The elevator chimed. Sal walked in, looking flushed and nervous. He was wearing a tracksuit and a gold chain that was too thick for his neck. Nonna, he exclaimed, forcing a smile. I heard about Vincent. Crazy stuff. You okay? I am heartbroken, Sal, she said, turning to him with a warm smile. Come here. Give your Nonna a hug." Sal hesitated, then walked over and embraced her. He smelled of cheap cologne and fear. Nonna patted his back, her hand feeling the wire taped beneath his shirt. She didn't pull away. She just held him tighter. "You've been a bad boy, Sal," she whispered into his ear. "I can feel the wire. Is it recording now? Is Agent Miller listening?" Sal tried to pull back, but Stefano and Marco were already there, gripping his arms. "Nonna, wait! I had no choice. They have my daughter on drug charges," Sal pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "We all have choices." "Caro," Nonna said, walking back to the stove. She turned off the burner. "You chose to sell your family to save your own skin. You should have come to me. I could have fixed the judge. I could have fixed the daughter. But you went to the enemy." She poured a ladle of sauce into a bowl. "Take him to the soundproof room," she ordered, her voice devoid of emotion. "Find out what he told them. Every word, every date, every name. When you are done. Well, the East River is very cold this time of year." Sal screamed as they dragged him away. Nonna didn't flinch. She picked up a piece of bread and dipped it into the sauce. "Perfect," she said. "Just enough basil." She looked at me, her eyes twinkling. "Eat, darling. You look thin. We have a war to start in the morning." The reality of our world settled in. The FBI was knocking at the door. The cartels were waiting for their weapons. And the political establishment was held hostage by a grandmother with a knitting needle and a detonator. There was no retirement plan in this life. There was only victory or a shallow grave. The walls are closing in, and the heat is rising. If the feds were at your door, who is the one person you would call to help you bury the evidence? Tag your partner in crime in the comments. I took a bite of the bread, the marinara rich and complex, tasting of vine-ripened tomatoes and the heavy metallic tang of adrenaline. From the soundproof room down the hall, the muffled thud of a heavy object striking flesh was the only dinner music we had. Nonna wiped a speck of sauce from the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin, her expression serene, as if she were listening to opera rather than an interrogation. "The sauce is good, Nonna," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. "Best you've made in years." "It's the patience, Anthony," she replied, pouring herself a small glass of Chianti. "Young people today, they want everything fast. Fast food, fast money, fast death. But a good sauce takes hours, and a good empire, that takes a lifetime." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a burner phone. It was vibrating against the marble counter. She looked at the screen, adjusted her glasses, and answered with a voice so sweet it could cause cavities. "Senator Whitlock, how lovely to hear from you. Did you receive the fruit basket? I made sure they included those pears you like." She listened for a moment, her eyes hardening while her smile remained fixed. She picked up a knitting needle and began poking at a loose thread in the tablecloth. "Now, Robert, there is no need to raise your voice. It is bad for your blood pressure. I am calling because your pit bull, this Agent Miller, is barking at my front door. He is disturbing my neighbors." She paused, listening to the senator's frantic explanations on the other end. "I understand he is independent," Nonna interrupted, her tone dropping an octave, losing all warmth. "But you are the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. You control the budget. You control the oversight. If Agent Miller continues to look into the shipping manifests at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I might have to release the security footage from your last visit to the Cayman Islands. You remember, Caro? The one with the 2 dancers and the pile of cocaine." Silence on the line. Nonna took a sip of wine. "Good. Reassign him. Send him to Alaska to count moose. I want him gone by morning. Give my love to your wife, Robert. Tell her I am praying for her hip surgery." She hung up and dropped the phone into a pitcher of water. It sizzled and died. Politicians are just chess pieces on a board made of money. If you held the leash of a senator, what is the first law you would force them to pass? Comment your executive order below. "The laundering," she said, turning back to me as if the call had never happened. "The construction contracts in Jersey are moving too slow. We have $60 million in cash sitting in the basement of the funeral home, and the dampness is going to rot the bills. I want it moved to the chaotic accounts in the Cayman Foundations by Friday. Use the art gallery openings as cover. Who is going to question a $10 million sale of a painting that looks like a toddler spilled paint on a canvas? The cartel wants their payment in diamonds for the next shipment, Nonna," I reminded her. "The crypto is for the rifles, but the pure cocaine coming up from Mexico? They want stones." "Greedy," she tutted, shaking her head. "But fine. Call Isaac in the Diamond District. Tell him Nonna needs a bag of flawless cuts. And tell him if he tries to slip me any cloudy stones like he did in '85, I will have Marco remove his thumbs with a cigar cutter." The door to the soundproof room opened. Stefano walked out, wiping blood from his hands with a wet wipe. He looked pale. "He talked," Stefano said, his voice grim. "Sal gave them the route for the trucks tonight. The feds are setting up a roadblock on the interstate." Nonna didn't scream. She didn't throw the wine glass. She simply sighed, a sound of deep, grandmotherly disappointment. "Change the route," she commanded instantly. "Switch to the secondary roads, the old bootlegging trails through the woods, and call the decoy trucks. Fill them with expired produce and send them straight into the roadblock. Let the FBI seize 10 tons of rotting cabbage while our merchandise slips through the back door." She stood up, her joints popping slightly. She walked over to Stefano and straightened his collar, patting his cheek. "You look tired, Stefano. Are you sleeping enough? You have dark circles." "I'm fine, Nonna," Stefano stammered. "You did good work with Sal," she said softly. "Is he finished?" "Yes, Nonna. It was quick at the end." "Good. He was family, even if he was a rat. We are not savages." She walked to the window, looking out at the glittering skyline of Manhattan. "The cartels are arriving at midnight. I want the snipers on the roof of the warehouse. High velocity, thermal scopes. If the Mexicans try to change the deal, if they try to take the guns without payment, I want their leader's head to disappear before he hears the shot." She turned back to us, her silhouette framed by the city lights. She looked like a ghost, a small, fragile thing that cast a shadow over the entire underworld. "This is the tipping point, boys. Tonight we become the primary supplier for the entire eastern seaboard. The Italians, the Russians, the Triads. They will all have to kiss my ring. But heavy is the head that wears the crown, and my neck is getting stiff. When the stakes are life or death, hesitation is the only sin. If you were in that room, would you volunteer to drive the decoy truck into the FBI trap? Or would you demand to be on the roof with the sniper rifle? Choose your role in the comments." "Anthony," she said, pointing a knitting needle at me. "Go to the safe. Get the blueprints for the Federal Reserve building. It is time we start planning for the retirement fund." "The Fed?" I asked, choking on my wine. "Nonna, that's suicide." "It's only suicide if you die, darling," she winked. "If you win, it's history." She walked back to the stove and turned on the burner again. "Now, who wants meatballs? I made extra." The duality was intoxicating and terrifying. One moment she was orchestrating a global criminal conspiracy, and the next, she was offering comfort food. It was this disarming nature that made her lethal. No one looks at a grandmother and sees the Grim Reaper until she pulls the scythe out of her knitting bag. "We need to move Sal's body," Stefano said quietly, before the guests arrive. "Put him in the trunk of the Lincoln," Nonna said, stirring the sauce. "Take him to the construction site on 5th Avenue. Pour him into the foundation. He always wanted to be part of something big. Now he will support a skyscraper." The elevator chimed again. This time it wasn't a family member. The doors slid open to reveal a team of men in tactical gear, but they weren't police. They were mercenaries, paid for by the cartel, acting as the advance guard. They carried automatic weapons and wore balaclavas. Nonna didn't flinch. She tapped the spoon against the pot. "Shoes off!" she barked, her voice cracking like a whip across the room. "I just had these carpets cleaned. You take those muddy boots off or you turn around and march right back into that elevator." The lead mercenary, a giant of a man, froze. He looked at his weapon, then at the old woman in the apron, then at me. The absurdity of the situation seemed to short-circuit his training. We are here for the security sweep," the man grunted, his accent thick. "I don't care if you're here for the second coming of Christ." Nonna snapped, walking toward him with the wooden spoon raised like a sword. Respecting a woman's home is the first rule of business. Shoes off. Slowly, terrifyingly, the armed squad began to unlace their boots. Respect is earned, but fear is instilled. Nonna just disarmed a hit squad with a wooden spoon and an attitude. What is the one thing your own grandmother did that terrified you into obedience? Share your story below. The sight of 6 hardened killers standing in their tactical socks, holding suppressed carbines while looking sheepishly at the Persian rug, was a tableau of absolute absurdity. Nonna wiped her hands on her floral apron, satisfied. She didn't need to raise her voice. Gravity simply seemed to bend around her. "Anthony, take their boots to the mudroom," she commanded, returning to the stove. "And if I see one scuff mark on the hardwood, I will use your thumbs to plug the leaks in the basement piping." Anthony scrambled to collect the combat boots, his suit jacket straining as he hauled the heavy footwear away. The leader of the mercenaries, a man whose dossier said he had toppled a regime in Central Africa, looked at Stefano. Stefano just shrugged, his eyes screaming a silent warning. "Do exactly what she says. Sit," Nonna said, gesturing to the long mahogany dining table with a ladle dripping with marinara. "Matteo will be here any second. You boys look thin. Mercenaries never eat enough iron." As the men awkwardly took their seats, placing their assault rifles on the table next to the crystal wine glasses, the heavy oak doors swung open. Matteo, the head of the Sinaloa connection, strode in. He was wearing a $3,000 suit and a look of thunderous impatience. But he stopped dead when he saw his elite vanguard sitting in their socks, waiting for meatballs. "Doña Elisabetta," Matteo said, removing his sunglasses. "My men look like children in timeout." "That is because they have no manners, Matteo," Nonna replied, walking over to him. She didn't offer a hand to shake. She offered a cheek. He hesitated, then leaned down to kiss it. "Now sit. We have business. Stefano, pour the Chianti, the 1982 vintage. It breathes better than our friend Sal does right now. Power is about controlling the environment. Nonna stripped these men of their dignity before the negotiation even started. If you walked into a meeting and saw your security team in their socks, would you walk out or sit down? Tell us your move in the comments." The atmosphere shifted instantly from domestic comedy to cold industrial menace. Nonna sat at the head of the table. She didn't eat. She just watched them. The shipment! Mateo started, cutting into a meatball. My people in Juarez are saying the price has gone up. 20%. Nonna smiled. It was a sweet smile, the kind that usually accompanies a birthday card with a $5 bill inside. Mateo, darling, you are confusing price with value. The price is what we agreed upon 3 months ago. The value is that I don't call the Senator of New York and have your entire distribution network designated as a terrorist organization by morning. You bluff, Mateo said, though he stopped chewing. Anthony, Nonna chirped without looking away from Mateo. Bring me the red phone. No, not that one. The encrypted one with the rotary dial. I like the clicking sound. She took the handset. Senator? Yes, it's Nonna. How is your wife's hip surgery? Good, good. Listen, I'm sending over a basket of muffins, but I also need a favor. That dossier on the trucking lines coming out of El Paso. Yes, the one we discussed at the fundraiser. Keep it on your desk. I might need you to sign it before breakfast. She hung up before the senator could respond. The silence in the room was heavier than the lead in the Mercenaries magazines. The price remains, Mateo said quietly. Good boy, Nonna said. Now, let's talk about the hardware. You want the Javelin systems and the night vision drones for your war against the Jalisco rivals. I have them sitting in shipping containers labeled medical supplies in Newark. But I need guarantees on the laundering. My laundromats and bakeries can only wash so much cash before the IRS gets curious. I need your casinos in Vegas. 30% fee, Mateo countered. 10, Nonna said. And I want a seat on the board. My grandson Anthony needs legitimate employment. He's terrible at shooting people. Maybe he will be good at counting chips. Anthony looked down at his wine, face flushing red. It was true, but hearing it from the woman who knitted his scarves stung. 15, Mateo said. And we handle the transport from Newark. Done, Nonna agreed. But if a single crate goes missing, Mateo, I will find out where your mother plays bingo, and I will sit next to her and tell her exactly what her son does for a living. Mateo paled. In their world, death was an occupational hazard, but shame brought upon the matriarch was a fate worse than execution. Nonna leverages family honor as a weapon more potent than a gun. In the criminal underworld, your reputation is your life insurance. Would you rather lose $1 million or lose the respect of your peers? Debate in the comments below. Now, Nonna said, clapping her hands. Dessert! I made cannoli. As Stefano went to the kitchen to retrieve the tray, a phone buzzed. Not the encrypted rotary, but a burner phone in Stefano's pocket. He checked it, and his eyes widened. He walked over to Nonna and whispered in her ear. The decoy truck was intercepted, he hissed. But the FBI didn't stop at the produce. They knew about the false bottom. Someone told them to look under the cabbage. Nonna didn't blink. She carefully broke a piece of crust off her bread. Is that so? They found the cash, Nonna. $2 million in small bills. Seized. The room felt the temperature drop. The mercenaries sensed the shift and hands drifted toward triggers. Nonna stood up slowly. It seems, she announced to the room, her voice trembling with mock sadness, that we have a leak. A little drip, drip, drip. She walked behind Anthony, resting her hands on his shoulders. He froze. She began to massage his neck, her thumbs digging into the tension knots. Anthony, sweetheart, you were the only one who knew the route for the decoy truck besides Stefano and myself. And Stefano was with me moving Sal's body. Nonna, I swear. Anthony choked out, sweat beading on his forehead. "I didn't say a word. I was at the safe house." "Shh," she cooed, leaning down to kiss the top of his head. "I know, darling. I know you didn't mean to. Maybe you talked in your sleep. Maybe you trusted the wrong girl. It doesn't matter why the faucet leaks, only that it must be fixed." She looked at Matteo. "I apologize for this domestic dispute. It is embarrassing, but business requires discipline." She walked to her knitting bag sitting on the sidebar. Instead of yarn, she pulled out a vintage pearl-handled .22 pistol. It was small, elegant, and deadly quiet. "Stefano," she said, her voice devoid of all grandmotherly warmth. "Take Anthony to the balcony. The view is beautiful tonight. Show him the city one last time." "Nonna! No, please!" Anthony scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. The mercenaries watched, fascinated and horrified. "I made you lasagna for your birthday every year," she said, her eyes like black glass. "And you sell me out for what? Immunity, a new identity. The FBI cannot protect you from me, Anthony. I am the one who knocks on the door at night." Stefano grabbed Anthony by the collar. He was crying, begging, a grown man reduced to a toddler. "Wait," Nonna said. Stefano paused. Anthony looked up, hope flooding his tear-streaked face. "Take his shoes off first," Nonna said coldly. "He's not dragging dirt onto my balcony." As Stefano dragged the screaming man toward the glass doors, Nonna turned back to Matteo. She placed the pearl-handled pistol next to her wineglass and picked up a cannolo. "The filling is ricotta and orange zest," she said, taking a bite. "Eat, Matteo. You're too skinny. Survival in this game requires ice in your veins. Nonna just ordered a hit on her own grandson to protect the Empire. Is this strength or madness? If you were Stefano, would you pull the trigger or turn the gun on the old lady? Make your choice in the comments." Matteo swallowed the bite of pastry, but his eyes did not leave Nonna's face. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, a slow, deliberate motion that sent a shiver down Stefano's spine. The wind from the open balcony doors whipped the sheer curtains into a frenzy, as Stefano prepared to shove the sobbing Anthony into the night air. "The ricotta is excellent, Nonna," Matteo said softly, reaching into his jacket. "But you are losing your touch. You focused on the leaky faucet in the kitchen, but you ignored the demolition crew in the basement." Matteo pulled a gold-plated Desert Eagle from his jacket, just as the private elevator doors across the room exploded outward. The blast wave threw the heavy oak dining table into the air, scattering fine china and crystal across the marble floor. Matteo thinks he has checkmated the queen. Is he a genius or a fool? Type Nonna, if you know he is already dead. Smoke filled the penthouse. Through the ruined elevator shaft, a dozen men in tactical gear stormed the room, their rifles raised. These were not FBI agents. They wore the insignias of the Sinaloa cartel. Matteo had not come to negotiate a truce. He had come to decapitate the American leadership. "Kill them all!" Matteo screamed, flipping the table he had been sitting at for cover. "Leave the old woman for me." Stefano dropped Anthony, who curled into a fetal ball on the rug, screaming as bullets began to chew up the furniture. Stefano dove behind the wet bar, returning fire with his dual pistols, his shots taking two of the intruders down with precise hits to the throat. Nonna did not run. She did not scream. She stood amidst the flying glass and splintering wood, looking at the mess on her floor with the disappointment of a woman whose grandchildren had tracked mud into the foyer. A bullet whizzed past her ear, shattering a vase of fresh lilies. "My mother brought that vase from Sicily in 1942, Nonna whispered, her voice cutting through the roar of gunfire like a razor. She shuffled toward the antique sideboard, moving with a surprising fluid speed. She kicked the latch on the bottom compartment. The wood panel fell away, revealing not bottles of vintage grappa, but a chrome-plated Thompson submachine gun with a drum magazine, fully loaded and oiled. She lifted the heavy weapon as if it were a rolling pin. Her face, usually soft and wrinkled with smiles, hardened into a mask of pure, reptilian coldness. "Stefano!" she barked, racking the bolt. "Cover your ears, darling." Nonna unleashed a torrent of lead. The Thompson roared, the muzzle flash illuminating her silver hair. She sprayed the room from left to right, the heavy caliber bullets shredding the tactical vests of the cartel hitmen. She wasn't firing wildly. She was sweeping the room with the efficiency of someone vacuuming a rug. 3 men dropped instantly, their bodies jerking as the matriarch of the Underworld cut them down. "You ruin my dinner." Bang, bang, bang. "You break my china." Bang, bang, bang. "You scare my grandson." She wasn't talking about Anthony. She was talking about Stefano. Matteo popped up from behind the overturned table, firing 2 shots that struck Nonna's shoulder. She stumbled back, grunting, her cardigan staining red. "Die, you old witch!" Matteo roared. "I have survived cancer, 3 heart attacks, and the federal government." She spat, stabilizing the submachine gun against her hip despite the blood. "You think a pimp like you can kill me?" Suddenly, a deafening mechanical whirring sound filled the room. The wind from the balcony intensified to hurricane force. A black military helicopter rose into view outside the shattered glass doors, hovering over the New York skyline. A minigun mounted on the side began to spin. The penthouse is under siege from the air and the ground. Who will survive this night? Type loyalty, if you stand with Grandma. "Get down!" Stefano screamed, tackling Nonna just as the minigun tore the living room apart. Walls disintegrated. The grand piano turned into splinters. The noise was apocalyptic. Dust and debris choked the air. Anthony was motionless, buried under the remains of a bookshelf. Matteo was laughing, calling out orders to the helicopter pilot on a radio. Nonna lay on the floor, her ears ringing. She looked at her knitting bag, which had been knocked over in the chaos. A ball of blue yarn had rolled under the sofa. Next to it was a small black remote control she usually kept in her apron pocket. She looked at Stefano, who was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. "Stefano," she coughed, "help me up." "Nonna, we have to retreat to the bunker." "No," she said, her eyes burning with a terrifying light. "We are not leaving. This is my house." She crawled toward the remote. Matteo saw her and stepped out from cover, aiming his pistol at her head. "It's over, Nonna," Matteo sneered. "Sign the transfer of territory, and I'll let you die quickly." Nonna's fingers closed around the remote. She looked up at him, looking every bit the frail, sweet old lady he thought she was. She smiled, blood on her teeth. "Matteo," she wheezed. "Did you know I had the building remodeled last year? I didn't just add the sauna." She pressed the red button. The ceiling above the balcony, where the helicopter was hovering, didn't just collapse. It detonated. Shaped charges embedded in the concrete structure blew outward, sending tons of reinforced steel and masonry crashing down directly onto the rotor blades of the chopper. The machine screamed as it was crushed. The helicopter spun violently out of control, the tail boom, shearing off and smashing through the glass, decapitating Matteo, where he stood before the wreckage plummeted 50 stories down to the street below. The explosion shook the entire building. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fires and the distant sirens of the NYPD. Nonna dusted off her skirt. She used the hot barrel of the Thompson to help herself stand up. She looked at the headless body of Matteo, then at the ruined room. "Stefano," she said, her voice steady. "Check Anthony. If he is alive, bring him to the kitchen. If he is dead, wrap him in a sheet. I need to put a roast in the oven. The police will be here in 10 minutes, and I want the house to smell like rosemary, so they don't ask too many questions. Stefano dragged Anthony's unconscious body across the debris-strewn parquet floor, leaving a smear of crimson that would never wash out of the imported Italian wood. Nonna didn't look back. She limped into the pristine white marble kitchen, the only room in the penthouse that hadn't been touched by the minigun fire. With hands that had signed death warrants for senators and strangled rivals with silk scarves, she opened the refrigerator and pulled out a seasoned leg of lamb. "Stefano, stop dragging your feet," she called out, her voice regaining that sharp grandmotherly authority that terrified grown men more than a loaded pistol. "And get Anthony some ice. He looks like a bruised peach." She placed the lamb in a roasting pan, arranging sprigs of rosemary with surgical precision. Outside, the sirens were no longer distant. They were screaming at the base of the tower. But something was wrong. The chopper blades of the police unit sounded different, heavier, rhythmic, aggressive. Nonna paused, her hand hovering over the oven dial. She tilted her head, listening to the thrum of tactical transport helicopters. "Those aren't the police, Nonna," Stefano rasped, dropping Anthony by the kitchen island and reloading his pistol. "That's the Federation. The Russians. Matteo must have sold us out before he died." "The Russians?" Nonna scoffed, setting the timer. "They have no manners. They didn't even RSVP." She reached into the oversized jar labeled cookies on the counter. Instead of biscotti, she pulled out 2 fragmentation grenades. She pulled the pins with her teeth, her dentures clicking softly, and held them tight. The service elevator at the end of the hallway dinged, a soft, cheerful sound that heralded doom. The penthouse is under siege from the air and the ground. Who will survive this night? Type loyalty, if you stand with Grandma. The elevator doors blasted inward with a concussive force that rattled the fine china in the cabinets. Black-clad operatives with night vision goggles and suppressed assault rifles surged into the hallway, moving with the fluidity of water. "Company's here," Nonna whispered. She rolled the grenades across the floor like bocce balls. They clattered over the marble, coming to rest right at the feet of the lead point man. He looked down, freezing for a split second. The explosion turned the hallway into a slaughterhouse. Smoke and shrapnel shredded the expensive wallpaper and the men standing in front of it. Stefano roared, leaning out from the kitchen doorway to fire blindly into the smoke, dropping 2 survivors who tried to push through the haze. "To the wine cellar!" Nonna commanded, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove, not to cook, but to deflect a stray bullet that whizzed past her ear. "Move, Stefano! Drag him!" Bullets chewed up the kitchen island, sending clouds of flour and shards of marble into the air. Nonna didn't run. She moved with a terrifying, inexorable purpose. She reached under the sink, bypassing the cleaning supplies, and triggered a hidden latch. The kitchen island split open, revealing a dual-mounted heavy machine gun turret that rose hydraulically from the floor. "Eat up, boys," she cackled, slamming her palm onto the firing stud. The automated turret roared to life, spraying 50 caliber rounds into the hallway, pinning the Russian hit squad down in a storm of lead and drywall. The noise was deafening, a jackhammer against the skull. While the gun did the work, Nonna ushered Stefano and the groaning Anthony toward the heavy oak door of the wine cellar. They tumbled inside, and Nonna slammed the reinforced steel bolts shut, just as a rocket-propelled grenade impacted the kitchen, incinerating the roast she had so carefully prepared. "My lamb!" she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of pure demonic fury. "Now they die, all of them. No survivors." The wine cellar was cool and smelled of oak and money. Thousands of bottles of vintage wine lined the walls, worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. But Nonna ignored the Merlot and the Pinot Noir. She walked to the back rack, where a dust-covered bottle of 1945 Romanée Conti stood. She twisted the bottle, and the entire wall groaned, rotating inward to reveal a steel passageway bathed in red emergency light. "The escape tunnel!" Stefano gasped, hoisting Anthony onto his shoulder. "Does it go to the street?" "The street is full of rats." Nonna spat, grabbing a medical kit from the wall and ripping it open to inject Anthony with adrenaline. "It goes to the subway, but first we have to clear the vermin from my living room." She walked to a control panel mounted on the wall. A screen flickered to life, showing the grainy black and white feed of the penthouse living room. More Russians were rappelling through the shattered balcony doors. A second helicopter was hovering, dropping ropes. They were swarming the apartment like ants on a picnic. Nonna's hand hovered over a switch protected by a plastic cover. It was labeled Pest Control. "Stefano," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If I press this, the structural supports for the top 3 floors are severed. The penthouse collapses into the floor below, crushing everyone inside. We survive in the bunker, but everything I built, my furniture, my photos of your grandfather, it all goes." Stefano looked at the screen, seeing the dozens of heavily armed men securing the perimeter. He looked at Nonna, seeing the blood on her apron and the cold, hard calculation in her eyes. "The penthouse is under siege from the air and the ground. Who will survive this night? Type loyalty, if you stand with Grandma." "Do it, Nonna," Stefano said. "Burn it down." "It's a shame," she sighed, smoothing her white hair. "I really liked those curtains." She flipped the cover and punched the button. A series of muffled thumps echoed through the building's steel skeleton. Then, gravity took over. The floor of the penthouse gave way. The screen went black as the cameras were destroyed. Above them, the world ended. The sound of thousands of tons of concrete, steel, and luxury furniture crashing down onto the floor below was like the earth itself splitting open. Screams were cut short by the crushing weight of the collapse. The bunker shook violently. Dust poured from the ceiling. The lights flickered and died, replaced instantly by the amber glow of the backup generators. Nonna stood in the dim light, dusting off her hands as if she had just finished kneading dough. "Come," she said, turning toward the dark tunnel that led into the subway depths. "We have work to do. The Russians have declared war. I'm going to need my other knitting bag, the one with the C4. She began to walk, her orthopedic shoes clicking on the metal grate. "And Stefano." "Yes, Nonna?" "Call the florist. Tell them I'm going to need a lot of lilies. We're going to have a busy week." The damp air of the subway tunnels smelled of rust and old electricity. Nonna moved with a surprising pace, her floral dress fluttering around her ankles as she navigated the uneven concrete. Stefano struggled behind her, half carrying Anthony, whose breathing had turned into a wet rattle. They emerged onto the platform of an abandoned station, a ghost of the transit system decommissioned in the 40s. It was supposed to be their safe harbor, a place where the corrupt transit authority head, a man Nonna had put through law school, would have a private train waiting. Instead, the platform was empty. Silence hung heavy, thicker than the dust. "Where is the train?" Stefano hissed, checking his encrypted phone. "Senator O'Malley said the line was clear." Nonna stopped. She sniffed the air, not for the scent of ozone, but for the scent of cheap cologne and betrayal. O'Malley never had the stomach for this life, she muttered, setting her heavy knitting bag down on a rusted bench. He always preferred his bribes in envelopes, not body bags. He sold us out, Stefano. Probably for immunity and a house in the Hamptons. Suddenly, floodlights blinded them from the tunnel's far end. The booming voice of an FBI tactical commander echoed off the tiled walls. "Federal agents! Drop your weapons! There is nowhere to run. We have the exit sealed. Surrender now." Stefano leveled his pistol, stepping in front of Nonna. "There's too many of them, Nonna. We're trapped." "Trapped?" Nonna let out a dry, crackling laugh. She unzipped the knitting bag. Inside, nestled between balls of yarn and half-finished woolen socks, lay a customized, gold-plated submachine gun with a shortened barrel. She racked the slide with a metallic clack that cut through the tension. "I survived the Sicilian separatist wars and 3 heart attacks. I do not get trapped by boys in windbreakers. The penthouse is under siege from the air and the ground. Who will survive this night? Type loyalty, if you stand with Grandma." "Cover your ears, dear," Nonna said sweetly. She raised the weapon and unleashed a torrent of fire toward the lights. The kickback would have shattered a normal woman's shoulder, but Nonna leaned into it, her frail frame rigid with the muscle memory of 1,000 firefights. The floodlights shattered, plunging the tunnel back into darkness. "Move!" she commanded. Chaos erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark station like a strobe light in a discotheque. Bullets chipped the ceramic tiles around Nonna's head, dusting her white hair with powder. She didn't flinch. She advanced, firing in controlled bursts, dropping 2 tactical officers who tried to flank them near the turnstiles. "Stefano! Stop slouching and reload!" She barked over the deafening roar of gunfire. "You're letting them pin you down. Aggression, boy. Aggression is the only currency they understand." They pushed up the stairs toward the street level, leaving a trail of brass casings and groaning federal agents behind them. But the surface was worse. As they kicked open the emergency exit doors into a back alley, they weren't met by freedom. They were met by a blockade. 2 armored FBI trucks and a black SUV blocked the narrow alleyway. A dozen agents took cover behind the doors, rifles raised. Behind the wall of law enforcement, a man in a sharp suit stepped out with a megaphone. It was O'Malley. "It's over, Nonna," the senator shouted, his voice trembling slightly. "The commission voted. You're too dangerous. You bring too much heat. Give it up, and maybe they'll put you in a nice facility." Nonna looked at the senator, then at the wall of guns pointed at her chest. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a tin wrapped in festive foil. "He thinks I'm dangerous?" she whispered to Stefano. "He hasn't seen dangerous yet. This is why I always tell you to eat your fruitcake, Stefano. You never know when you might need the density." She wasn't holding a cake. It was a block of high-grade plastic explosive packed with ball bearings, rigged to a dead man's switch she had just depressed with her thumb. "The penthouse is under siege from the air and the ground. Who will survive this night? Type loyalty, if you stand with Grandma. Stefano, get Anthony behind that dumpster," Nonna said, her voice turning cold as absolute zero. "Nonna, no!" "Do as I say," she snapped, the grandmotherly warmth vanishing instantly, replaced by the terrifying visage of the crime lord. She stepped forward, holding the tin high. "O'Malley!" she shouted, her voice surprisingly strong. "You forgot the first rule of this family. We don't negotiate with the help." She threw the tin. It wasn't a long throw, just enough to clear the distance to the lead armored truck. Nonna dove behind a concrete pillar, just as the world turned white. The explosion was deafening, a concussive wave that shattered the windows of every building on the block. The fruitcake detonated with the force of an anti-tank mine. The armored truck was lifted into the air, flipping end over end before crashing down onto the SUV, crushing it flat. Fire and shrapnel tore through the alley. The senator disappeared in a cloud of smoke and debris. Nonna stood up, dusting the soot from her apron. The blockade was gone, replaced by a burning wreck and screaming agents scattering in confusion. "The car is 3 blocks east," she said calmly, checking her wristwatch. "We're going to be late for Mass if we don't hurry. And Stefano." "Yes, Nonna," he choked out, staring at the burning devastation. "Remind me to send O'Malley's widow a condolence card. It's the polite thing to do." Stefano steered the black sedan through the smoke, his hands trembling on the leather wheel. Behind them, the wail of sirens grew louder, a chorus of confusion mourning the sudden vacancy in the Senate. Nonna sat in the back, adjusting her pearl necklace in the rearview mirror, checking for soot on her cheek. "Look at this mess," she tutted, brushing a speck of ash from her lap. "Anthony, be a dear and check the global markets. The senator's sudden departure should have triggered the shorts on his defense contracts by now." Anthony, bleeding from a graze on his forehead, tapped furiously on his tablet. "It is crashing, Nonna! Just like you predicted. The stock dropped 40% in 10 minutes. Our shell companies in the Caymans are buying it all back for pennies." "Good," she said, opening her purse to retrieve a tube of lipstick. "That should cover the cost of the fruitcake and the renovations. Waste not, want not." The car glided to a halt in front of the cathedral. The massive bronze doors stood open, swallowing the daylight. Nonna stepped out, her cane tapping rhythmically on the pavement. She did not look like a woman who had just assassinated a high-ranking government official and decimated a federal blockade. She looked like a pensioner arriving early for bingo. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of incense and old wax. She walked past the empty rows, her footsteps echoing in the vast silence. In the front row, a solitary figure sat hunched over, his head in his hands. It was Director Miller, the head of the bureau, the man who had authorized the raid. Nonna slid into the pew beside him. He flinched, staring at her as if he were seeing a ghost. "You are supposed to be dead," Miller whispered, his face pale. "The satellite thermal confirmed the heat signature. The drone strike. Technology is a wonderful thing, dear." Nonna interrupted softly, patting his hand with her cold, papery fingers. "But it lacks a mother's intuition. I knew you were coming before you signed the warrant. I could smell the betrayal on you last Christmas, when you refused my gingerbread." Miller looked around for his detail, but the church was empty. Stefano and Anthony stood by the doors, locking them with a heavy thud. "What do you want?" Miller asked, his voice cracking. "You have won. You have the money, the routes, the politicians. What is left?" "Respect, Christopher, and manners," she scolded gently. She reached into her oversized handbag. Miller flinched, expecting a gun. Instead, she pulled out a freshly knitted scarf, thick and red. "I made this for you," she said, draping it around his neck. He sat paralyzed, the wool scratching against his skin. "It is going to be a very cold winter for the Bureau. I want you to stay warm while you explain to the President why his favorite senator had an unfortunate gas leak accident." She tightened the scarf just slightly, not enough to choke, but enough to remind him of the grip she held on his life. "The investigation ends today," she stated, her voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm register. "You will announce that it was a terrorist cell, and that the brave men of the family helped neutralize the threat. You will give Stefano a medal, and you will come to dinner on Sunday. I am making lasagna." "Yes, Nonna," Miller breathed, defeated. The weight of the scarf felt like a noose. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Good boy." Now kneel and pray, not for forgiveness but for gratitude. Gratitude that I am a sentimental old woman who hates to see a child go without a mother." She turned and walked away, her cane clicking against the stone floor. Stefano opened the heavy doors, letting the blinding sunlight pour in. "Nonna?" Stefano asked as they descended the steps. "What if he talks?" "He will not, darling," she said, stopping to admire a pigeon on the railing. "He knows that the scarf is treated with a transdermal compound. As long as he takes the antidote I put in his Sunday gravy, he will live a long, healthy life. If he misses a single dinner, well, old age comes for us all eventually." She took Stefano's arm, a frail old lady supported by a giant in a suit. "Now drive. The bakery opens in 20 minutes, and I need to check the dough." The world may burn, Stefano, but people still need to eat. That is the only true power. We feed them, we clothe them, and when necessary, we bury them. That is the legacy. She smiled, a sweet grandmotherly smile that chilled the blood. La Familia is forever. If you are loyal to the grandma, comment La Familia and share this record.